Opening day is right around the corner, and with that, I'll be bringing a new series to the channel where I power rank every MLB team. With that being said, it was particularly my goal with the first one to set a bar that respected the seasons these respective teams had last year, while incorporating some level of predictions with the offseason additions. Therefore, this list does not necessarily reflect how I think the end of the season list will look, but instead a current snapshot of the teams. And with that caveat out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the video. Starting at the bottom, we have the Chicago White Sox, who, all things considered, won't probably make it out of this spot at number 30. This team finished the year last year as one of the worst teams in MLB history, if not the worst. Then they traded away Garrett Crochet, their best pitcher. They don't really have much to look forward to. Maybe Luis Robert has a good year, becomes a trade bait piece at the deadline. Who knows? But just not a lot to look forward to. I will say the farm is starting to get there. You'll see guys like Kyle Teal, maybe a Colson Montgomery. This team does have some pieces coming, but it's still not a team that you're like dying to go see by any means. At number 29, we had the Miami Marlins, who, again, like the White Sox, there's not much to get excited about here. There really isn't much that really could propel them forward either. Their pitching staff can be exciting, but at the end of the day, who knows? They never can stay healthy, and Sandy Alcantara will probably be on the move by some point in this season, probably at the deadline. And then you have names like Xavier Edwards, Connor Norby, Jesus Sanchez, even, who could be something, but probably won't be the MLB stars that could really propel this team forward. At number 28, I have the Colorado Rockies. I did move them up over the Marlins, even though they finished below them last year. And that's because I really like some of the pieces on this team. I think Ezekiel Tovar is sick. I think Ryan McMahon is sick. You have some other guys who could bounce back, like Zach Veen. There's just some pieces that I like a little bit better, but that's not to say they're going to be an exciting team by any means. They're in a really tough division, and if they weren't, they might be able to make some noise, maybe crack the 70 win column, get mid 70s. But I just think the division is going to be too tough for them to take that next step. But I do think they are starting to maybe put some pieces together that could make this team exciting. Similar thing to the Athletics here at number 27. They're starting to formulate some pieces. You have Lawrence Butler had a great year. Brent Rooker, you just signed that huge extension. They have pieces, and then they actually made some moves in the offseason to make this team better. You brought in Luis Severino, you brought in Jeffrey Springs. If he can stay healthy, he's a phenomenal pitcher. I just They're just a little bit of ways. I do think there is room for them to punch up, unlike the other teams, but for right now, I'm going to leave them at number 27. And then you have the Los Angeles Angels, who, again, very similar boat. They have pieces that could make them a very dangerous team come September. I don't know if they're quite in that playoff picture yet, but definitely a team you could look at as a team that could do some damage here in the American League West, especially considering there's not that heavy front runner that there has been in the years prior. This team has Mike Trout, and if he can stay healthy, you never want to count that team out, especially considering they're starting to build some pieces around him. Nolan Chanwell, if he can do something, Zach Neto, Logan O'Hop, they have some pieces, and then you have Christian Moore on the way. You have Caden Dana to help out the pitching staff with Yusei Kikuchi. They have some pieces that could make this team better. I don't know that they're going to be a playoff team, but definitely punching upwards and in the right direction. Team that refuses to go in the right direction, the Pittsburgh Pirates, my favorite team. Ooh, that was a rough offseason to embrace. That was a rough offseason in general. And then their spring training cuts, I would argue, made their team worse. But we're here. We're in the present. They still have a young team. You still have Paul Skeens. There is room for them to go upwards, but I just don't think they maximized their ceiling this offseason. So for that, I dropped them 2 spots at number 25. The biggest faller of the offseason was the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's not by trading off their team and building up this prospect system. No, it's by doing nothing. This team is an aging team. They have a lot of past their prime superstars on bad contracts. Poster child of that is Nolan Arenado, but you also have people like Sonny Gray on this team. It just feels like a mix of just mediocre talent at this point. This rotation is not good, and there's just not a lot of things that I can look at with this team and be like, yeah, they're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be in the hunt. There's just not a lot for me to look at, but I think they have a higher floor than a lot of the teams previously mentioned. So for that, I put them at number 24. For the Washington Nationals, they didn't really do a whole lot this offseason. They brought in Nathaniel Lau, but they did give up Robert Garcia in that trade. That's a good left-handed reliever that they did give up, but Nathaniel Lau will be a solid player for them at first base. Other than that, they really didn't do a whole lot, didn't really add to this team. So I didn't really move them all that much. I think this team can continue to get better. maybe be a team you don't want to face come September. But at the end of the day, they didn't really do a whole lot that changed my outlook on them. I think they'll be an exciting team, but I don't think they'll be a team that's quite punching for the playoffs yet. So I have them here at number 23. For the Toronto Blue Jays, I think they did make some quality moves this offseason, grabbing Andres Jimenez, grabbing Yimi Garcia. There's some moves they made that I really enjoyed, but I just don't know if it's enough to push them into this playoff picture that we see in the American League. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will likely be out the door after this year, so they really needed to do more to push this team higher, and I'm not seeing it at this point. I have them here at number 22. For the Rays, they finished last year at the number 20 spot. I don't really think they did a whole lot this offseason that increases that value in my mind. They did add Danny Jansen, Eloy Jimenez, Hassan Kim whenever he gets back from injury. Those are okay moves, but they're nothing that moves the needle. It is the Rays, so I'm probably stupid for counting them out, but I just don't see how this team. I think they could make the playoffs, but it'd be the Rays fashion, the Rays magic. But I don't think I look at this roster and think they can, in my mind, compete with the rest, but the Rays will probably somehow pull it out. The Reds, I liked some of the moves they made this offseason. I think that Brady Singer trade was really good for them. They're starting to form a rotation that will be really good. Hunter Green at the top. You got Rhett Lauder coming. Even have guys, even more guys coming through the system. And then you have a solid piece like Brady Singer. You finally unclogged that logjam at DH with Jonathan India. And then you clogged it back up with Gavin Lux. So I didn't love that move, but I think they did do some things that should raise the floor to this team. They should have some prospects who bounce back. A Noel V. Marte, a Christian Encarnacion Strand, people like that should bounce back. They were top prospects for a reason, but number 20 is where I have to put them. I need to see it on the field before I can push them much higher. And it's a similar thing for the Twins here at number 19. They didn't make the offseason moves I would have liked, so I did have to drop them a few spots. But I think this team has the potential to be really good. This team has a lot of young prospects who do a lot of things really well. I just need to see them stay healthy and be on the field and do well in the actual games because as a prospect, they've been great. As an early MLB career, they've been great, but they just don't stay healthy. Byron Buxton is the catalyst for that. But then you have Royce Lewis, also doesn't stay healthy. I just need to see it on the field for a full season and actually see it all come together before I can push them higher. For the Giants at number 18, this is a team that I feel like if they were in a different division, I would think of them a lot differently. But the fact they're in the National League West with the Dodgers, with the Padres, with the Diamondbacks, it just makes this team feel kind of obsolete, even though they have a lot of stars. They have Matt Chapman, you have Willie Adames, you have Logan Webb, you have Patrick Bailey, who looks like he can be great. They have a lot of really good players, but it's just they're in a really tough division and it's tough for them to make ground. And for that, I have them here at number 18 because I think they'll likely finish around 500. But at the end of the day, I think if they were in a different division, the NL Central or something, AL West even, I think they could punch a lot higher. But here at 18, I think they'll finish about 500. And then we have the run of American League West. At 17, I have the Seattle Mariners dropping 3 spots after an atrocious offseason. How you don't commit to this team, I don't know. I really don't. He This team is just primed to make a playoff run. They have the pitching staff. If they had just an ounce of offense, this team would be fantastic, but they just refuse to invest in it, and it really sucks. I do think that narrative gets a little overblown because this offense should be better next year. You think that Julio Rodriguez will bounce back, Cal Raleigh's sick. If JP Crawford can bounce back, that'd be fantastic. But they definitely just needed to invest in this team a little bit more, and it was just really sad to see that they didn't. But for that, I gave them the number 17 spot. At 16, I had the Rangers, who did actually invest into their team. Grab Jake Berger, you grab Jock Peterson. I would have loved to see them add a few arms that would actually be healthy. I don't love the fact that you're counting on Jacob DeGrom to be there for you in September and October. That's what it's looking like the team is counting on right now, and he just hasn't proved that he can stay healthy for a really long time. I don't even remember the last time he pitched a full season, but it's just like they maxed out the offensive slider and made the pitching very volatile, in my opinion. So for that, I left them at 16. And then you have the Houston Astros at number 15. I was not the biggest fan of their offseason. I know they did kind of do some patchwork to kind of fix it up, but I just wasn't the biggest fan of losing Kyle Tucker in the present tense. Long term, probably makes sense. You probably weren't going to keep Kyle Tucker after this season, so it makes sense. But losing Kyle Tucker cannot be undersold. He is a phenomenal player, one of the top players in the MLB. You did get back Cam Smith, who does look phenomenal so far this year. He's raking in spring training, raked all of last year. He just looks great, and it's going to be hard to keep him out of the major leagues if he doesn't start the year on the roster. You have Isaac Paredes starting at third, who should be improved. I don't know if you're going to get the Rays production that you got, but should be much better in Houston as opposed to Chicago. And then you added Christian Walker, who should be a really big upgrade over what they've been running out at first base for a long time. So if everything goes well, this team can certainly have lengthened their lineup. They're not going to get the premier offensive production that you saw from Kyle Tucker, but I think that's the perfect vote. I just don't think you can look at this team and be like, yeah, they're the clear favorite in the American League West. They're the favorite, sure, probably, but I just don't know that you can look at them and be like, yeah, this team's going to run away with the division. So I have them here at 15, clumped with the rest of them. At 14, we had the Boston Red Sox, who made some phenomenal additions this offseason. You know, they went out and traded for Garrett Crochet really early on, gave up Kyle Teal, they gave up Braden Montgomery, some big name prospects, but they certainly improved. They certainly got the stud, the ace of this team that they needed. They also added Alex Bregman really late on, who should be a great addition with that green monster. His swing profile, much like Isaac Brady's, is pull the ball in the air. That's going to work great in Fenway. And then you also have Walker Bueller and other names like that who should elevate the floor of this team. I really liked the offseason they had. I couldn't quite put them in the top 12 because the top 12, I was like, okay, a lot of these teams are playoff teams from last year. I wanted to respect that, but I wanted to put them on the cusp of it right there at number 14, I think is fair. And then number 13, it's a very similar team to the Red Sox where I loves their offseason. You added Kyle Tucker to an already above average team that had a winning record last year. Kyle Tucker, top 10 player of the game. Not much needs to be said there. He'll definitely elevate this team further. I just think that I couldn't put them quite above a team like the Brewers just because they haven't proved it yet, but this team is on the come up. I'm excited to see what the Cubs can do in 2025. And then at 12, you have the aforementioned Brewers. Again, I couldn't quite find the floor for this team. I like some of the pieces, but I just don't think that they will be quite on the same level they were last year. I was a negative Nancy on this team again the year before, so I'm sure that I will be wrong once again, but I just don't see the vision with the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm not sure how they keep churning out great results with this roster because at the end of the day, I don't think this team should be quite as good as they are. Now, with that being said, they have some pieces. Christian Yelich will probably be your full time DH. I think Reese Hoskins will probably have a bounce back year. I think Jackson Churio is just phenomenal. You have pieces, sure, but I just don't think this is a team that'll be able to replicate their success from last year. And I have them falling a bit here to number 12. At number 11, we had the Arizona Diamondbacks, who did miss out on the playoffs last year after being the World Series representative. I think they'll have a bounce back year, especially considering you brought in Corbin Burns to this team. They did lose a bit from their DH department, losing Jock Peterson, but there are some moves that they made that were pretty good. I just think that all things considered, they should be a bounce back candidate. You have people like Jordan Lawler on the way up. This team, should be pretty well right where they were last year, slightly improved. So for that, I gave them the number 11 slot, moving up 2 spots. At number 10, I had the Kansas City Royals, who I did have losing 2 spots this offseason. I didn't know what to do with these AL Central teams because I didn't think that they necessarily had the star power of some of these teams in the Western and Eastern divisions. With this, I had the Kansas City Royals dropping 2 spots to number 10. I think they did have some definite strengths. Their pitching is phenomenal. They added Jonathan India, who should be pretty good. He might lose some of that power in Kaufman, but he should be still pretty good. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be phenomenal. Vinny Pasquantino, if he's not hurt too bad, should be really good. So hopefully there are some pieces that could come together, but I'm just not a full on believer of this team to make like a postseason, front runner. But I think postseason should definitely be in the ideal world for this team again this year. And then it's the same thing with the Detroit Tigers, who made that miracle run last year. They don't have the superstar talent, but they have really good players across the diamond. You're counting on a Spencer Torkelson bounce back. The rotation should be lengthened behind Tariq Skubal, so that should be great. Again, I'm not the biggest believer without the superstars. So again, it's like playoffs, yes, but are they a serious contender? I don't think so. So for that, I have them here at number 9, losing 2 spots as well. And then you have the San Diego Padres, who look like they finally hit the wall with this team. You thought about what made them so dangerous last year. It was the superstars combined with the depth that they had, and they lost a lot of the above average role players, I would say. The Hassan Kims of the world where they're good, but they're not going to be your superstar. Your Tanner Scotts of the world, who actually probably is a superstar reliever, signed with the Dodgers. You lost to Kyle Higashioka. You lost just guys around the diamond who you're like, okay, this guy was a good player for this team. They lost a lot of that, and they'll have to refine that. And for that, I did drop them a good bit. And they didn't really add anybody back. They did get Nick Pavetta, but like, is that who you're counting on to be your next star player? I don't know. I have them here at number 8. And then at number 7, we have the Baltimore Orioles, who I found really tough to rank because in paper, you had a bad offseason. You lost Corbin Burns. You lost Anthony Santander, who, all things considered, were really good players for you last season. You brought in Tyler O'Neill and some guys to patch up the starting pitching, but at the end of the day, I think there's more holes left from this roster than answers. But at the end of the day, I think their young players should bounce back. I think you have people like Jackson Holiday, Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basallo. They're still on the way that should still improve this roster. You have people like Gunnar Henderson who are stars, Adley Rutschman you're counting on to bounce back a little bit next year. There are pieces in place to make this team better, but I'm just not sure that they took the steps to make them a serious favorite. But in the American League, I just don't think there is a serious favorite at the moment. And then at number 6, it was another team I found really difficult to rank in the Atlanta Braves because it, crap hit the fan last year. Everything that could have went wrong for the Atlanta Braves. Acuna got hurt, Strider got hurt. You had down seasons from Olsen, you had down seasons from Murphy. Uh, Anything that could have went bad for the Atlanta Braves last year. How much of that will rebound and how much of that is actual result? I think they will be much better. I think getting Strider back healthy should be good. Who knows if he'll be good to go probably by May. Same thing with Acuna, but this team should be better. But it's just like how do you boost them up after having such a bad year last year? I couldn't put them over any of the teams above them that had, championship series types years last year, but it was really tough for me to find a spot for them, so I gave them the number 6 spot after even a bad offseason. And then you have the Cleveland Guardians, who I gave a lot of respect to for making that championship series run last year, but I just don't know that they will be able to replicate those results this year. I gave them the number 5 spot out of respect, but it's not a team I have a lot of faith in this year to be up at this sort of level at the end of the year. I don't know that they have a World Series roster put together. I think the bullpen will naturally regress. I know that they still brought in a lot of the pieces that made this team so phenomenal last year, but on the pitching side, I think they will regress. Then you traded off Andres Jimenez and Josh Naylor. So you created some holes. You brought in Carlos Santana, who should be relatively the same value at first base, but I think you made your roster worse, and your bullpen, which was kind of the catalyst of your team last year, should regress just kind of naturally. I think there are some definitive holes, so for that, I gave them 5. I think it's a respectable mark, but I definitely don't expect them to stay at that mark throughout the year. At 4, I gave it to the Phillies, basically just because I had the Guardians falling. They didn't really do a whole lot this offseason that like wowed you. They grabbed Jesus Lazardo from the Miami Marlins, great. But like at the end of the day, I don't think they really did a whole lot to improve. But I just think they kind of gained up to the 4 slot based off of the Guardians falling. They do have a really good roster. I think we can all agree to that. They have a really good roster. They have a really good pitching staff now to go along with this loaded lineup. We've kind of just been waiting to see it all click in the postseason, and that's kind of what we're waiting on. They have a really good team. They've run out the same really good team for years. It's just a matter of seeing it click in the postseason, seeing it all come together for a full postseason run. So for that, I gave them the number 4 spot. At number 3, I have the American League representative, the New York Yankees. Again, this is more off the fact that I don't think that there's a clear-cut favorite in the American League. And then this team, they made the World Series. They didn't necessarily perform great there. And then you lost Juan Soto in free agency. So I just think there's some question marks with this Yankee roster moving forward, especially whenever you consider they lost Garrett Cole as well to injury. There is some definitive question marks. I just need to see some of these question marks answered before I can put them as the clear favorite in the American League. You're counting on a bounce back from Cody Bellinger and Paul Goldschmidt. I don't know if that's going to be enough value to replace and Juan Soto. There's some definitive things that like I'm looking at and I'm like, can I really respect them and put them number 2 based off what they did last year? I don't think so, especially whenever you consider who some of the moves that were made by the number 2 and number 1 team. And then you had the team Juan Soto went to in the New York Mets, making it to number 2. You have to remember this team made it to the National League Championship Series last year. Obviously, they had a kind of magical run, kind of similar to the Tigers, but I think there's a lot more merit to them. They have a lot more superstars. And then you added Juan Soto to an already great team. This team, phenomenal. They have a lot of great pieces. Have some question marks about the rotation, and, there's some question marks, but I don't think they're as big of question marks as the New York Yankees. I think this team is a lot more completed. And for that, I gave them the number 2 spot. You had a great offseason, you had a great season. I think that's pretty good for number 2. And then at number 1, it's pretty obvious. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers. I have them getting an A plus in the offseason, had them winning the World Series. Like, this team, what more can you ask for a number 1 team to start the year? They didn't lose hardly anybody in the free agency. They only added to this team, grabbing Roki Sasaki, Tanner Scott, Blake Snell. This team is just loaded top to bottom. There's not much to say. They're just phenomenal. I'm sure they'll be able to replicate their success again this year. Even if everything hits the fan, this team's still probably an easy playoff contender, probably a division winner. This team's great. Not much to say here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please comment down below, where you guys see these teams. Again, this isn't necessarily my predictions, but kind of a snapshot of respecting last season, but also incorporating some off-season changes. Let me know where you guys see these teams maybe finishing the year. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed and have a great day.